Welcome back to the first virtual CBDNA Athletic Bands Symposium. My name is Dr. Amy Knops, and I am the Associate Director of Bands and Director of Athletic Bands at the University of Missouri. I am also a proud member of the CBDNA Athletic Bands Committee, hosting you both today and tomorrow. It is my distinct honor to introduce our next session titled Converting Student Leadership Development to a Virtual Platform and Tips for Chapter Operations for KKPsi and Tau Beta Sigma. And our presenters, Dr. Malinda Matney from the University of Michigan, Marko Krstatovich, the National President of KKPsi, Erika Pope, National Vice President for Colonization and Membership of Tau Beta Sigma. And as a reminder, if you have questions for our presenters, please ask it in the Q&A, and we will work to address them either during or at the end of our session. This will be recorded and available on what will be a new CBDNA channel on YouTube. And we will share any documents from our entire event at the conclusion of the symposium. Dr. Matney, take it away.
Thank you so much, Dr. Knops. That's a very generous introduction, and we are excited with everybody to be a part of what we hope isn't traditional, because we hope this moment in our world isn't traditional, but definitely a historic event. We are joined by several people for KKPsi and Tau Beta Sigma. As Dr. Knops said, my name is Malinda Matney. I serve as Managing Director for the Center for Research on Learning and Teaching at the University of Michigan. And as such, my work for the last 3 months now has been turning our world into a virtual space. I also serve as chapter sponsor for the new chapter of KKPsi at the University of Michigan, and I'm a past national president of KKPsi as well. I'm joined by Marko Krstatovich and Anthony Falcone, representing KKPsi. Marko is our national president. Anthony Falcone is our national vice president for professional relations. For Tau Beta Sigma, in addition to Erika Pope, the vice president for colonization and membership, easy for me to say, we're joined by Adrian Rahl, who is Tau Beta Sigma's national president. Today, we're going to be covering a couple of different things. I'm going to be walking through on campus how examples might look as far as taking your student leadership into a virtual space and really leveraging the students you have to lead in a variety of ways. And if we go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what you'll see. So talking a bit about how your students can lead in wellness activities, in musicianship, preparing band camp. They can actually have quite a leadership role in that, and doing some strategic planning with you. Through all of these, exhibiting a lot of student leadership and student initiative. And then talking at the KKPsi and Tau Beta Sigma national levels, they have some great guidance for chapters as far as how to do best practices in the space that we're in now. And the national organizations also have some great support for our chapters. So we're going to be taking a look at both of those. If we go to the next slide, one of the things that is going to be very important as we go through these next months where there's a lot of uncertainty, campuses are having many moments of having to address some of the same questions of, we really don't know what an in-person semester will look like yet. We really don't know how large a class can get together. No, we don't know about football yet. Regardless of how it looks, when we get through all of this, many things will be changed about our campuses. But when people feel normal is when our students and our ensembles and student organizations are really operating at their peak. When you hear the band on campus, you know that everything's okay. And our students are in a position to set the tone to shift the message and get people on board to see that yeah, even in this space, we can have community, because that's what students are craving. And quite frankly, that's what all of us are craving. So let's go to the next slide. Um, it seems such a short time ago. At the beginning of February, we reopened the Michigan Union on our campus. After 16 months of building the Michigan Union, the height of where all kinds of proximate getting together with other students takes place. The band was there to celebrate. Plexiglass was there to keep people from falling over a balcony instead of to protect people from their breath. And it was really a delightful scene. And the band had probably the best social distancing in the building that day because it was that packed. We're not in that space now. And so what we are having to do is give people that sense of joy, that sense of love of the institution, that everything's okay. And our students are really on board. And what they want to know is, how can we help? How can we be a part of that? And there are some key ways that students can take a lead, and in fact, in ways in which students might be able to better get into communities around our band more than we can. So let's go to the next slide. Our students are going to be important outreach allies. One of the challenges that our faculty had as we closed winter term was to do welfare checks for students that were starting to slip out of the cracks. So unlike many institutions, when we had to make the pivot, we had completed our spring break. Students had come back for 2.5 days of instruction. We were told at the end of that Wednesday, we're going to take 2 days off, we're pivoting to online, and scatter. And so it was kind of disquieting. For our students, immediately they took to that in terms of wanting to do the welfare checks on their own, and they had some very creative solutions for that. So in terms of working with the KKPsi and Tau Beta Sigma chapters, those chapters designated quarantine buddies within the chapters, and some of this reached out into the broader Michigan band as well. So these were pairings of people who probably didn't know each other well before this, but were checking in on each other to make sure people felt connection and people felt like there was somebody who was waiting for them on the other side of the line. Interestingly, in our chapter meetings, they also led mindfulness activities, and that could range anywhere from, let's take a 5-minute meditation, which I never thought Kappa Kappa Psi would start a meeting with a meditation, but that seemed to work very well. Let's get together some yoga in times that weren't chapter meetings. Let's take care of some other types of checking in to make sure people are okay. Really taking that moment to remind each other that we were people behind the pixels. They've also been doing physical health challenges as well. And so our folks have been reminding each other, okay, if we do have in-person band in the fall, those entries are not going to train themselves. You are going to have to train your high step like nobody's business. And so they've been very mindful about that. Particularly if you're living in Michigan right now, we had snow all the way till the beginning of May, which itself is kind of a cruel trick on people doing virtual instruction. But it got our students fired up to do even more of the physical health activity. One thing that we discovered is that in the course of disrupting people's housing, and in a lot of students' cases, people's employment, that we had a lot of students who were displaced, who had housing and or food insecurity issues. In my role as a chapter sponsor and as somebody who works at the institution, I know pretty well where students can go to apply for grants, where students can go to experience a food pantry on campus. We actually have a campus food pantry. Some campuses do, and some campuses have partnerships with the community. I could help our students understand where those resources were. What our students were exceptional at was identifying which students needed the resources. So there are going to be some students who just don't want to come up to Dr. Matney and admit that they have a food insecurity issue, or that because they've lost their employment and their parents don't have a steady housing situation, that they're kind of floaty. But they will say that to their fellow students. And so this is a great partnership. As directors, as people who have the ear of your students, you can let your students as well know where are the places on campus that you can go for these kinds of resources. And this is going to be part of Band Family taking care of Band Family. A lot of the work that our students are doing throughout is celebration and making sure that people feel seen. So, for example, in one meeting this semester, highlighting a little bit of presentation from each of the newest members that just joined the organization, which was kind of a surreal thing watching these folks discuss what they had learned as a result of their membership education programs while they were, most of them, sitting in their childhood bedrooms. So you could see the transition of a year or 2 years in their lives as far as their maturation. And that was really pretty special. So if we can go to the next slide. So our students really did take advantage of this opportunity to practice their music. And we recognize that for those who were staying with their parents, sometimes that was difficult. So we had, for example, one student in our chapter coming from a family of 8 kids. So you can see one picture of him was him practicing his trombone while the parents and the kids were all trying to do their virtual work on their homework or their professional work. So we know it's a challenge to try to practice at the same time that people are trying to do other kinds of work in the same space. But our students were really committed to that. And so they've been doing some fun things, having some small ensembles. They've been sharing music that they find empowering, and particularly at this point, and sharing why it's empowering. That's been a really great way for them to broaden their musical tastes. In terms of celebration, they've also made sure that music is seen in our virtual celebrations. So our KKPsi and our Tau Beta Sigma chapters got together with our men's glee club and our women's glee club to put together a virtual Victors. Just this very nice pastiche that came together very well, presenting the Victors, both performed by instruments and by voice in a nicely balanced way. Our university president was so charmed by this that he wanted that as part of graduation for our university-wide graduation that happened virtually. I have to say that's a very powerful way for the students to take leadership and to move forward. And they've taken that in some other directions too. Now they've started putting together some happy birthdays to perform for people because they just want an opportunity to play their instruments. And they were cut short about 2/3 of the way through the semester. If we go to the next slide, this is a quote from one of our students today. One of our students who serves on our marketing and information team said, when we're apart, my band friends and connections are what keep me going. We're a family. I worry about the freshmen who don't have that yet. This is a sentiment that is not uncommon with our students. So what you can do with this is really leverage this, and some other directors talked about this earlier today about introducing prospective first-year students to the band program, even in this virtual way. This way of being a family is something that transcends whether you're sharing it by computer or whether you're sharing it in person. So this is something that is really at the heart of our students and at the heart of yours. Let's go to the next slide. So our students are really working on their leadership skills now. And if they've ever had a moment when they could develop some good communication skills, some good organization skills, this is that time. So our students, for example, have led workshops about how to perform leadership roles within the band. What's it like to be a rank leader? They can have that conversation in this space and feel very chatty, very informal, and really convey information that people need to hear. Our chapters also transmitted what's it like to be a chapter officer in this space? What's it like to be a committee lead in this space? I should say our chapters kept meeting on their same schedule throughout the semester. They just simply introduced a video conferencing into that and let rip. And that together with a Slack channel that became pretty overused in some amusing ways, was how they maintained some connection through the semester and made it feel normal, as if we were meeting at 8 o'clock on Monday night at the Michigan Union. Students can really inform what fall looks like on campus. Many campuses are at the point, if I could paraphrase what many of our university leaders are doing right now on campus as far as what we're doing in fall. But that said, they are asking for a lot of input from students at this point, because they've thought through a lot of what public health experts have to say, a lot of what faculty are concerned with, both in terms of personal health and in terms of how to deliver instruction. Now they're really listening to students in terms of what students' concerns are as far as health, but also what students' concerns are as far as community. On our campus, for example, we have over 600 students that are part of committees to determine what fall looks like on campus. And some version of that committee might exist on your campus too. And your chapter members can really help lead the way to that. A caution I would give, I will just say that I'm definitely over the age of the average undergraduate student, and I very much embrace the fact that I am not a master of all the technology. Oftentimes, students are assumed to have mastered all of this technology, and many of them haven't either. Some are really great with this video conferencing stuff and all the other attendant technology that goes with it. Some are not feeling it, as some are not in their element. And even if they were in their element, some of our students are in tech challenged environments. They may have limited tech at home, or they may run into the situation that a variety of homes do, in which so many people are trying to be on the internet at once that that's challenging their ability to be there. So our chapter and our students have been using some asynchronous means to get information out so that people can have at their fingertips what they wanted to read. So for example, for a chapter election, we actually had students send in little videos that took the place of their speeches to talk about why they want to be president or why they want to be vice president. So our chapter had the luxury of about 3 days to watch those at their leisure whenever they wanted. They could read the printed materials. Yeah, they could pick and choose about that. And there wasn't a crunch of everybody has to do this at the same time. In many ways, they were modeling for our faculty how the combination of asynchronous work and synchronous work might come together to make the time that we have together work extremely well. So over the course of 2 months, if we go to the next slide, we had gone from that beautiful gathering in the Michigan Union to our chapter officer installation ceremony done remotely. But these folks are no less eager to be a part of leading our band into their next endeavors. And I'm really proud of them for the work that they're doing. A couple more things that your chapter can do. If we go to the next slide. Your chapter can help prepare virtual band camp. We call it Band Week here at Michigan, although really it's a band fortnight. Like everything we try to do that's a superlative, we cram 2 weeks into a week. Your students can help you build a virtual presence. They are living in the learning management systems that are on your campus. In the case of our campus, it's Canvas. You might have Blackboard or Moodle or something else, but they are living in that space. So having Band Week be in the same space as the other classes that they are taking will be super helpful to them. But the students can help you assemble videos, instructions, demonstrations. And the nice thing is once that's assembled, that's assembled. So unless you change how you do a step or you want to freshen up how the uniform looks, you can use these videos from year to year or use them to help polish things up in the season as well. So you can do virtual tours this way and stage out virtual tours through a learning management system. Again, students, once they are admitted and they've been given their credentials on campus, can have access to this. So our first year students will be able to have access to this after they've been accepted into the Michigan Marching Band. And that's a great way to introduce them to this work. Finally, I should mention that all of this requires a whole lot more structure, a whole lot more planning than most of us ever give to anything. I mean, no matter how planful any of us are, we tend to rely on the fact that we can answer another question and another question in person. We are encouraging our students to create plans for the year, and actually our student chapters are meeting through the summer. The officers are meeting quite regularly, committees are meeting to get ready for the things that they know they can do. And I will say the students are a little bit nervous about asking about what it is that the band program needs, not because they're shy or that they're scared of you, but rather because they hear the message from university leadership, from band leadership, that it could be any of a number of scenarios. And they can hear that as far as, well, then we can't do anything until we hear which scenario. The fact is, we know that they can deliver any number of things. No matter which scenario happens on your campus, there's probably some base work that needs to happen for any of your scenarios. And you can be sharing with your students what kind of base work that is and really give them some of the work to do. I think they would be grateful for that opportunity to be a part of making band go. And it's okay to say, I don't know. There are some things I just don't know yet. It's okay to be to share that you too are frustrated that there's not more there. They get it, and actually, it would be a relief to them to understand that you too are chomping at the bit, waiting to go. So I've talked a lot about Michigan in specific, but these are some pretty broad principles that whether you are at a large campus or a small campus, that there's some underlying principles of communication, leadership, and giving your students some work that can work for you. I noticed in the chat that Dr. Pasquale from the Michigan Marching Band has invited folks to a University of Michigan happy hour. So if you had questions specific to Michigan, I think he would be delighted to field them. If you have other questions more broadly, we'll be happy to field them at the end of this conversation or at any other time. But I'm going to hand this over now to Marco and Erika to take the baton and go.
Thank you, Malinda. And much of what we're going to talk about today is actually going to echo many of the things that she brought from the University of Michigan, specifically for both our chapters of KKPsi and Tau Beta Sigma. As you can imagine, with almost 300 plus chapters of the two organizations combined, when COVID-19 really kind of took over everything that we've been doing and kind of putting a halt on a lot of things, as I'm sure all of your band programs kind of felt this as well. Nationally, we felt, all of the questions and the stressors from many of our students on both sides. So next slide. Here are some of the topics that we're going to discuss from the standpoint of what we're hoping our chapters will continue to work on and be able to accomplish during this time where we're trying to figure out what campuses are going to be in person or what campuses are going to be kind of in almost a piece by piece going back on campus, or starting part of the semester on campus and then ending the semester off campus, and figuring out what all of those elements and how our chapters can be helpful to you, as well as directors of bands can be helpful to them. So starting off with college and university policies for student activities. Next slide. Oh, before I go on, one of the things I will say is many of the things that we are going to discuss today are available in our official statements on both of our chapters and both of our organizations, their websites. So please feel free to click on those. But we did want to kind of put names and faces and speaking to this as well. So one of the things that we are we feel is very important is that college and university policies, you as the director of bands, of course, are probably going to get a lot of that information before our students do. So we want to encourage you to make sure that first and foremost that you are aware of what the school says in terms of your institution's policies, as well as what they're allowing in terms of student groups and meetings. So some of the questions that we hope that you are able to help our organizations answer are student groups first and foremost, are they allowed to meet? And if so, in what capacity? So does that mean that they can meet in a normal setting with social distancing, or are they going to have to meet online in this format, even if they are on campus, or even if your campus has decided to stay off campus coming into the fall semester? And what are the requirements? What are the restrictions? And a big one, specifically because I'm in charge of colonization and membership, we want to know, can they recruit new members? And I know that's tricky. We'll touch on that a little bit later on what that could look like as we're going along. The main thing is that we as a national organization want to make sure that we know that information. And so, Mark, if we could go back a slide, actually. Thank you. One of the things that we want to make sure that we are aware of is what each of our campuses are doing so that we can govern ourselves as well. So if your students have actually been instructed, we encourage you to also send those emails to healthandsafety@tvsigma.org or healthandsafety@KKPsi.org. We have a team that is collecting that data and helping us work with chapters individualized if we need to, and figuring out what every campus's policy is. So that's something that we want to make sure that we are aware of so that we can help assist in that. And as well as ensuring that your students understand all their institution-driven guidance and policies. Next slide. So moving into this, some of the very basic things that we're wanting each of our chapters to continue to work for and strive for. And as you can imagine, the idea that we had to kind of flip everything in a couple of weeks' time, many questions. So how to elect chapter officers, virtual chapter meetings, complete national paperwork on time, participate in virtual chapter visits, recruitment, and membership education. So touching on a couple of those things, with chapter officers, this is the most important just because that allows us to know who's in charge of the chapter, and that business can continue as we move into the new school year. So if that has not happened, we do encourage chapters on both sides to make sure that they are able to take care of that as soon as they can, so that we have a clear picture as to what officers will be moving into the next year and who we need to interact with if we have questions about what's going on your campuses. Virtual chapter meetings, we have all, I think, are starting to become accustomed to having meetings and taking what would have been done in person and moving it to an online format. So many of our students have also adapted to that. And one of the things that we're finding from all of our students is that they're saying continuing to have chapter meetings online has helped them feel like this is a more normal situation in terms of not being on their campuses, being away from each other. And so this has really, truly brought a sense of normalcy to the necessity of being remote at the time. So there are lots of things that we want chapters to accomplish in that time while they're meeting online. Obviously, there's not a lot of business they can do, but kind of speaking to what Malinda was saying, it's a good time for them to start planning for the future. We do encourage that they use the normal time that they would meet, just moving it to an online format, because that time has already been set aside for their chapter meetings, and kind of fitting along with what many of your universities have said about professors keeping their schedules the same, if at all possible, we have also encouraged our chapters to do that as well. So with that in mind, keeping that in place, as well as continuing to use Robert's Rules of Order, because that is what governs both of our organizations. And also just to keep ensuring that a successful transition from in-person meetings to online meetings, that they are inviting U.S. Director of Bands, if you can, to be a part of them. With our national paperwork, we are continuing to collect that. One thing that we have been doing as a national organization, or both national organizations, is to offer as many accommodations as we can with those. But we do want our chapters to continue to fill out that paperwork so that that allows us to understand what is going on your campus, but also how we can be effective in assisting them and what they need from us as a national organization to be successful on their campuses while we are remote. So if they have unique needs, that allows us to be able to give them what they need to, again, be successful. And then one thing, and I wanted to actually bring Marco into this part, virtual chapter visits. So for both organizations, we do have systems in place where members of our national leadership visit campuses, because we want them to have that one-on-one experience and be able to ask questions. And normally we would send someone to the campus. Obviously right now, for thinking about health and safety, not only of our students, but also of our national leaders, because we didn't want to ask them to go into an unhealthy situation and traveling. And of course, traveling is a catch-22 for everyone at this point. And so for Tau Sigma, our chapter visitation assistants, also known as CVAs, what we have been doing with them is our system in place is to touch base with the chapters that we know really needed that interaction from a member of our national leadership team, and having them conduct virtual visits. Very much the way that they would do their in-person ones. Everyone's required to be there. They go through some workshops and do a lot of what they would do in person, online presentations, question and answer sessions, that kind of thing. Marco, if you want to talk a little bit about what your chapter field representatives and what that's going to look like as we move into the new year.
Yeah, and Erika, it's really much the same way. So our chapter field representatives, which are 2 members of the staff for our organization, they would normally be hopping in their RAV4 and driving around the country. Actually, about this time of year, they'd finally be back in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and settling in for the summer. As we move into the fall semester, we'll be continuing doing those visits virtually, but understanding that given your campus, we want to be really mindful of the fact that, even when we're able to get out of Zoom University and stop having to sit in on screens all the time, that we still want to be very mindful of the fact that some of that will still happen. And so trying to spread that work out and have multiple follow-up visits, conversations that come off of that. So for both organizations, I think you're going to see that fall semester trying to be very flexible and recognizing that while one part of the country for our chapters may have one context, another one may have a different. And so we want to make sure that we're protecting the safety of our volunteers and all of our staff.
Wonderful. And then the other thing that we want to talk about is recruitment and membership education. So a lot of that probably seems like, how in the world would that even work in a situation where you're away and usually being able to recruit? I know that for your band programs, that's something that you're absolutely looking for. And we want you to consider the idea that the two meet hand in hand. The idea that considering that y'all want to continue to recruit for your band programs, we need students to be a member of KKPsi and Tau Sigma, to be in bands, to be a part of those organizations. And so being able to recruit new members is a very critical part of the life of your band program and our organizations. And so we know that this might prove to be a very challenging task while being remote, but we have found some ways to do that. So if we could, I believe, we'll come to that in a minute. If chapters opt to pause their spring 2020 classes, we do expect, we did have a few chapters that rather than completing the process, what they decided to do is actually pause and pick it back up in the fall, thinking that they might have been able to go on campus, and that's fine because we didn't know where a lot of our chapters were going to be this semester coming up. But if they did have a spring 2020 class, we do expect them to pick that back up in the fall if they can, to be able to resume that and kind of get them over the finish line in terms of membership education. So there are ways to do that. Our chapters have done a phenomenal job of segueing from in-person to online. They've used a lot of those tools. And we're actually going to talk a little bit about those later. But here are some chapter assistants for band programs. Next slide. How directors of bands can assist their chapters. It's kind of a two-way street in the instance that your chapter can be what makes your band program feel normal. Our chapters, they're very flexible, you know, as the old saying goes, to show must go on. And our band students are really that way. And that, of course, then does go into our chapters. And so what we're asking them to do, and what you can ask them to do, is to be flexible and willing to adapt to some of the needs that you have for your band program. So for example, chapters that maybe your campus is going to allow you to be in person, ways that you could use your chapters maybe to help in terms of like, what is that going to look like? You know, if band rehearsals are allowed, who knows what that's going to look like, but helping to keep the social distance thing going. If they're not allowed to come on campus, but you still want them to be able to help promote your band program, they can serve as ambassadors for your new students. And this is where them telling their stories about being members of your band program and being members of your community there on your campus is going to be really important. And you can do that via email or social media. I've seen a lot of chapters where this is something that's already kind of in place. And so now they're just going to kind of amp that up a little bit. So directors of bands are you're giving them kind of a pen pal list, an email pen pal list, and members of the chapter are writing to welcome them into the band program, tell them a little bit about what band is like there at their university and their college, and tell their story from a personal perspective of, you know, why they came to that university, why they love being a member of the band, what their favorite, you know, stories are, and that kind of thing. So please use our chapters in that regard to kind of serve literally as the ambassadors for your new students. And then going back to, again, what Malinda has said, taking the time to plan for the future so that when in-person interaction is allowed, that, you know, they have a game plan, you know, plan A, plan B, plan C, and then working with you on a plan for safe in-person ensembles, and just kind of touching base back on to that again, is knowing what that's going to look like. And so whatever your needs are, feel free to reach out to your chapter leadership and ask them how they can be, or tell them even, you know, how they can be the most help to you. Again, they're flexible. They're able to make just about anything work as long as they have your guidance. But on the other side of things, director of bands in 2 chapters, some ways that you could be very helpful to them is just continuing to keep open lines of communication. So when it's time for them to reach out to you to ask for guidance, or to pick your brain about what the band program needs, is being able to get in contact with you. If you can attend as many meetings as you can, doesn't mean you have to be at all of them, but we do encourage you to attend at least 1 or 2 as they are meeting online, especially if they're meeting in person, just to be there to show that you were there to support them, just as they're there to support you and your band program. To also approve national paperwork on time, and just making sure that all of that information gets to us on time. And then finally, again, going back to the recruitment piece, assisting chapters in identifying prospective new members. I often say that directors of bands, you know, you have the foresight that chapters on the ground level sometimes don't get to see. So if there's, you know, many of our ideals on both sides, KKPsi and Tau Sigma, that you feel like a student, especially if, you know, you've had to interact with a new student in some capacity, who might be good in terms of recruitment, then it would be absolutely important for you to be able to let that be known. One thing that we did, again, yes, Malinda did just bring up, is that chapter summary reports are due June 1st. So if they have not sent that to you, you may want to check in with them. If they have sent that to you, we encourage you to take the time to look through it to make sure everything looks the way it should. And then please do send your approval so that they can be able to submit that on time. I know June 1st snuck up on all of us. That is Monday. So Monday we will be in a new month in that regard. Next slide. So operational FAQs in the time of COVID-19. I should preface this that this is just a snapshot of some of the immediate questions that we received from chapters, from directors of bands, from sponsors. And so one thing that I did want to preface this also with is that we do have a working system right now that we are continuing to cultivate that are going to be for a more formal FAQ that will be hosted on both of our websites that will offer guidelines and resources as we continue to navigate this, as all of you are. And it will continue to be updated as we create more guidelines, more resources, and answer more of the questions that come along. As you can imagine, our students, they think of everything. They think of things that we didn't think about, and we go along with that, and we learn from them just as much as they learn from us. So some of the questions we've gotten, of course, are how does the chapter install new officers? Can we have a membership education process intake while remote? And how would that work? And then finally, initiation rituals, how do we accomplish that remotely? Next slide. So as you can imagine, the installation ceremony is something that is really exciting, really important, but obviously being able to do it online is not something that people can necessarily think of how that would work. And this is an example, this picture right here is actually an example of something that did work out really well. In the Northeast District, which is of Tau Beta Sigma, they actually did a mass installation of chapter officers within their district. And this allowed them time to not only touch base with them and kind of check in on the chapters within their district. The district counselors are the ones who actually administered the oath. And the installation, like the actual paperwork used to install new officers, has been provided to both KKPsi members and Tau Beta Sigma chapters. And so they do have that, but in the event that they want it to make a little bit more special or a little, you know, kind of an oomph to it, many of our districts have taken this method just to be able to give them something really, you know, as we're recognizing our organizations and recognizing, you know, congratulatory points and checkpoints in which our students can, you know, of course, they need to, you know, understand how special it is that they are kind of helping us navigate these waters as an officer. So they have the power to do that online themselves. They do have that, but we also have had some special moments like that as well. Next slide. One of the things about our membership education programs and why we're excited about having the two things that you see on your screen there is this has actually made this transition of having remote membership educations a little bit easier. So for both organizations, as of for the last 2 years, for KKPsi, for us, new to this school year, we both have standardized national curriculums that have been written that every chapter is required to use to educate their new members. And so we encourage chapters, if they are going to take on doing a remote membership education program and recruitment, that they follow the prescribed national curriculum for their organizations, that they, once they've done that, that they fill out the appropriate paperwork, which is the initiate registration form, pay all new initiate fees. And upon receipt of those two things at our national headquarters, all of our new initiates will be afforded the rights of active members. Some of the ways that some of our chapters have been able to make that transition from in-person education to online is they've used their learning management systems. And some of those tools that we have heard about or we have recommended that chapters use are Google Classroom, Google Hangouts Meet, Zoom. I think Zoom is everyone's usual choice of internet video conferencing. Kahoot, we have a lot of chapters that have used that to make the process a little bit more fun, especially because you're online, you're in front of your computer, and something about bright colors and music our students particularly love. And so as long as they're doing those things, as long as they are offering that membership in an online format, we will do our part to make sure that those new members are, again, afforded all the rights of active membership. The last part of that are initiation rituals. So at this time, we are not recommending that chapters try to host their own online virtual rituals. And I was actually gonna kick it over to Marco to talk a little bit about what KKPsi has done. And I can say from my standpoint, Tau Beta Sigma, we are still developing what we want to do. We will be offering something, but at this time to safeguard our secret work, but also to be able to ensure that it is presented in a way that is not only educational to the membership candidates or the new initiate members, that they are aware that this is just kind of a precursor to hopefully being able to have an in-person ritual, no matter where they finished in the process. So Marco?
Yeah, and for KKPsi, this spring, given all of the changes that we all had to navigate, we were able to put on initially some discussions for new members, walking through the values of our organizations, not necessarily walking through the ritual itself, but kind of a discussion and value-based work on what the ritual means and how to apply it to your life. We've since spent the summer, and we have a team that's actually working through it right now, looking through all of these technical things that all of us are becoming, certified at some point. I'm sure that we'll all have certificates in the mail soon for all these different new technologies that we're supposed to be experts of. And so we have a team that's actually been working through the security features within a tool like Zoom to be able to do ritual in some form if necessary, because we do not want to have our students be held back, recognizing that there are a myriad of different technical challenges and security issues that we have to work through. And we have spent a lot of time trying to walk through it. And one thing that I certainly recommend as I have worked with not just our national organization, but also at our district and at our chapter level, is having some students that are empowered to take ownership of the technology pieces and to actually spend the time to sit through those long tutorials that they offer, to talk with and ask questions, and to sit there and try to troubleshoot together as a team. We were able to find some alumni whose only job was to just really get to learn these tools and to start making suggestions of here's a way you could make this better, or here's some options you may not have thought about. And having that tool that at the collegiate level where Erika and I work, where we would be able to kind of pull into those professionals and having some students empowered to do that work and then to connect with experts in the field has really allowed us to also look at things from a very different perspective, which in many cases is the perspective that we were missing. So as we move forward, this is we have recognized as an organization, we're still trying to work out all the kinks, but our hope is to be able to do at least some form of initiation rituals virtually. Hopefully, I think as all of us always say, hopefully for just the fall, but we always know we don't know until we know.
Yep. And like I said, from the Tau Beta Sigma standpoint, we are trying to cultivate what that will look like. I do know that our national leaders are looking for ways in order to ensure that not only is everything safeguarded, but also that we as national leadership can kind of oversee the experience that our new members are going to have in terms of rituals. That really does kind of complete our part of the conversation. And I hope that there was something in there that was very helpful, but we do want you to please continue to ask questions to us. Again, there are the website, or sorry, the emails. If your university has something in particular going on in terms of COVID-19, we would love to know that information, and our COVID-19 data team will be able to put that together for us and kind of keep us in the know of what's going on. And I think we are open for questions.
Well, we don't see any questions in the Q&A portion of Zoom, but if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put those in that portion. We want to give a tremendous thank you to Malinda, to Marco, to Erika, Tony, and Adrian for sharing this extremely valuable information on student leadership and tips for members of our Kappa Psi and Tau Beta Sigma members of each of those chapters that may be at each of our campuses. We so appreciate you sharing tonight. And again, if you got questions, put those in there. We invite our presenters to stay on and answer some of those questions along the way as well. But thank you. There's a lot of applicable things that I think we heard on both sides that can be transferred to any level, both high school and collegiate, of how we organize some of these things with regard to student leadership and so forth. So thank you again. Before we move into our final session or our virtual receptions, I do just want to thank you all again for joining us today. It's just been an amazing and inspiring day full of great optimism, resources, and scientific data to help us make some decisions as we move forward. Yes, we know that there's a lot of things that we just do not know at this point. So as we look at these items, these are some elements that, again, are going to help us in some of those decisions moving forward.